Picture yourself on your morning commute. You're on a stretch of road you drive like every single day.
Right, total autopilot.
Exactly. And your phone buzzes in the passenger seat. Without even forming a conscious thought, your hand just reaches over, grabs it, and you glance down at the screen for 2 seconds. Just 2 seconds.
Which doesn't feel like a long time.
No, it doesn't. But you're traveling at 60 kilometers an hour, which means in those 2 seconds, your vehicle just covered 33 meters.
Wow.
Yeah. That is the length of an entire basketball court, and you drove it entirely blind.
It's a terrifying piece of math when you actually sit down and think about it because, I mean, in those 33 meters, a child could step off a curb or the car ahead could slam on its brakes or, a traffic light could change.
Right.
Yet from inside the cabin of that car, you didn't feel like you were taking a massive gamble. You felt completely in control.
Welcome to today's deep dive. If you're listening to this, you are the learner. You're here because you want to understand the underlying mechanisms behind how the world works, but without all the information overload.
And today, our mission is extremely laser-focused.
Yes, it is. We are unpacking one specific section, Chapter 4 to be exact, of a really fascinating source document called HarGhar Se EkSainik, which translates to One Soldier from Every Home.
And we're isolating this single chapter because it basically dismantles a very comfortable illusion that almost all of us hold.
Yeah, the illusion that we're good drivers because we know the rules.
Exactly. The text argues that road safety actually has almost nothing to do with your intellectual knowledge of the rules. Instead, it's all about the massive invisible gap between what we know and the subconscious biological habits that, actually steer our cars on an ordinary Tuesday morning.
So before we really get into the mechanics of this, I want you, yes, you listening right now, to just mentally rate your own driving skills. Give yourself a score out of 10.
I'm guessing most people are thinking an 8 or a 9.
Oh, absolutely. If you're like most people, you probably gave yourself an 8 or a 9. You consider yourself a responsible driver who maybe, just occasionally bends a rule when the coast is clear.
Right.
Well, we are going to explore why that specific mindset might actually be the most dangerous thing on the road today.
We really need to start by looking at the people who feel the safest behind the wheel. The chapter introduces this concept that we can call the expert behind the wheel.
Okay.
Think about a person who's been driving for 20 years without ever being in a serious accident. I mean, they read traffic patterns faster than a beginner. They handle the steering and pedals with zero conscious effort.
They just flow with the traffic.
Yeah, they feel like an absolute master of their environment.
Hold on, though, because I have to challenge this right out of the gate.
Go for it.
If I've been cooking a family recipe for 20 years, I don't measure the salt anymore, right? My muscle memory is just dialed in. But on the road, the ingredients like the other cars, the weather, pedestrians, they change every single day.
That's very true.
So shouldn't I want those 20 years of reflexes? Doesn't that long track record make me faster and more capable of handling sudden changes than someone who just got their license yesterday?
Well, it's a very intuitive argument. And yes, your mechanical reflexes are sharper. If someone slams their brakes, your foot moves faster than a novice's foot would.
Right.
But here is the critical distinction that the text draws. Mechanical competence is not the same thing as risk perception.
Okay, wait. Explain that.
Experience builds your reflexes, absolutely. But it also creates a massive blind spot around how much risk you are actively choosing to tolerate.
Walk me through how that actually happens, though. How does being good at driving make me blind to risk?
It comes down to something called the just this once decision. And it's really about how our brains neurologically process survival. Let's say you decide to skip wearing a helmet for a 5-minute scooter trip down to the local store. You tell yourself, it's just this once. I'm staying right in the neighborhood.
Yeah, we've all done something like that.
Right. And you do it, and you arrive home perfectly fine.
Which, to the brain, feels like a victory. The brain basically says, see, nothing bad happened.
Precisely. But let's look at the biology of that moment. Your brain has a reward system that is constantly updating its predictive models. When you take a risk and you survive without any consequences, your brain's risk assessment center actually downregulates the perceived threat. It quietly logs that helmetless trip as safe.
Wow. So it lowers the alarm bells for next time.
Exactly. Over months and years, that perfect record of getting away with minor violations just accumulates.
Yeah.
What began as a rare exception quietly becomes your operating default.
Because the brain is physically rewiring itself to ignore the danger.
Yes, Completely. The reality of the physics hasn't changed at all. I mean,
Yeah.
the asphalt is just as hard today as it was 20 years ago. The cars are just as heavy.
Right.
Only your internal perception of the risk has changed because it's been warped by an unbroken series of survivals. So, competence and carelessness start running side by side.
That is wild.
And because your competence has kept you alive so far, the carelessness goes completely unchallenged. Experience, without ongoing self-examination, becomes the very thing that prevents a person from seeing their own vulnerability.
That reframes so much of how we judge our own behavior, which I think brings us back to that terrifying math we opened the show with.
The 33 meters.
Yeah. If our experience gives us this false sense of security, how does that actually hijack our physical actions? The source text talks about a phenomenon here called the 2-second lie, which kind of explains why we inevitably reach for that buzzing phone.
To understand the 2-second lie, we really have to look at where habits live in the brain.
Okay, neuroscience time.
Yeah, a little bit. When you are sitting safely on your couch at home and your phone buzzes, you pick it up. You have probably done this tens of thousands of times.
So easily. Maybe hundreds of thousands.
Right. So that action is no longer controlled by the prefrontal cortex, which is the logical decision-making part of your brain. It has actually been outsourced to the basal ganglia, which handles automatic procedural memory.
So it's basically a deeply ingrained motor program. Buzz equals reach.
Exactly. And the basal ganglia does not pause to check your situational context before executing that program.
Wait, really? It doesn't check where you are?
No, it doesn't care if you are safe on a couch or navigating a highway at 60 kilometers an hour. The stimulus happens and the hand just reaches. The driver feels entirely capable of managing this because their brain is feeding them the confidence of 10,000 successful phone checks.
But the couch doesn't move 33 meters forward while you look down at a text message.
Exactly.
This actually makes me think of another concept from the chapter that absolutely blew my mind. The familiar road illusion.
Oh, that's a brilliant one.
Because if the basal ganglia is running the show with our phones, what happens when we drive the exact same route to work 1,000 times in a row?
Well, the brain is essentially an energy-saving machine. Continuous, high-alert observation requires massive amounts of cognitive calories.
It's exhausting.
It is. So when you drive a route repeatedly, the brain transitions from active processing, where it is actually looking at the physical details of the road, to predictive coding.
I was trying to find a good way to visualize this predictive coding, and I kept coming back to typing a computer password.
Okay, I like that.
Because your fingers know your password instantly. They just fly across the keyboard without a single conscious thought. But if someone asks you to stop and spell your password out loud, letter by letter,
Oh, you completely freeze.
you completely freeze. You actually have to look down at your hands and consciously reconstruct what your fingers do. When we commute, we are basically driving in password mode.
That analogy actually perfectly illustrates the danger here.
How so?
Because when you are typing your password, you're operating in a closed system. It's just you and the keyboard. But the road is a dynamic, shared environment. When you enter password mode on your commute, you stop reacting to the road as it is right now, and you start driving a stored memory of how the road usually is.
But, I mean, isn't that efficiency necessary? If my brain had to process every single leaf on a tree and every crack in the pavement on a 40-minute commute, I'd be mentally exhausted before I even got to my desk.
It's biologically necessary to save that energy, yes. But the chapter makes a critical distinction about how this private efficiency turns lethal in a public space.
Give me an example.
Consider a really specific scenario. Let's say you know there is a deep pothole or a large stone at a very specific spot on your local neighborhood road.
Because I drive it every day.
Exactly. Because you have a deeply ingrained mental map of this hazard, you instinctively brake hard right before you reach it.
Which feels to me like I'm being a highly attentive, safe driver. I mean, I'm avoiding the obstacle.
Sure, but consider the driver directly behind you.
No.
They are a stranger to this neighborhood. They do not have access to your internal mental map.
Oh.
From their perspective, on a seemingly clear street, you just slammed on your brakes for absolutely no visible reason.
I didn't even think about that.
Right. By acting on your private knowledge without checking your mirrors or signaling your intent, you've just created an instant high-speed hazard. You imposed your private memory onto a stranger who cannot read your mind.
That is.
Familiarity gives you speed of execution, but it quietly strips away the active attention needed to connect with the shared reality of the road.
That is a total paradigm shift. What felt like earned local expertise actually became a weapon because I wasn't present in the shared environment. I was literally driving inside my own head.
Exactly.
Well, if familiarity creates that kind of blindness, we really need to talk about what open space and modern technology do to us.
Yes, the false confidence of the open road.
The chapter digs into this concept of the speed you already control, and it exposes a really uncomfortable truth about human choice.
It does. Think about how drivers behave on a wide open stretch of road. They naturally accelerate, usually pushing well past the speed limit.
Yeah, because it feels safe.
Right. The internal justification is always that the road is clear, so they have the right to drive faster. But when a crowded intersection or a busy market suddenly appears ahead, those same drivers effortlessly ease off the accelerator, slowing smoothly from 80 down to 10 kilometers per hour.
The body just manages the deceleration perfectly. There's no panic, just control.
Which proves a really profound point. The mechanical ability to be safe, the ability to control the vehicle's speed and momentum, is always fully intact. Driver is completely capable of driving safely.
So why is that ability suddenly dormant on the open highway?
Exactly. It strips away the excuse of simply losing control. Speeding is revealed to be a conscious choice. It is a decision to prioritize a 2-minute gain in arrival time over the shared safety of the community.
We treat speed limits as suggestions for when it's convenient, rather than absolute boundaries.
We do.
And speaking of pushing boundaries, this leads to a scenario that is probably the most chilling part of the chapter, the 4 a.m. family highway drive.
This is crucial because it doesn't involve reckless street racers. It involves ordinary, well-meaning families trying to beat the holiday traffic or the summer heat.
Yeah, they pack up the car, drink some coffee, and decide to just drive through the night.
Everything feels managed. But human biology doesn't care about your travel itinerary. Between 4 a.m. and 6 a.m., the body experiences a severe dip in its circadian rhythm. And that is combined with a massive buildup of adenosine, which is the chemical that creates sleep pressure.
And sheer willpower just can't override that chemistry, right?
It simply can't. When that sleep pressure peaks, the brain will literally force local groups of neurons offline to get the rest it needs. And this results in what the text calls microsleeps.
I need to understand the mechanics of a microsleep. Is this just like nodding off or your head drops and you jolt yourself awake?
No, it's much more insidious than that. A microsleep is a neurological blackout lasting anywhere from 1 to 4 seconds.
4 seconds.
Yes. Your eyes might actually remain completely open, but your brain has entirely stopped processing visual information. You are legally blind and unconscious.
That's terrifying.
At highway speeds, a 4-second microsleep means a 2-ton vehicle has covered over 100 meters with absolutely no one piloting it. And often the driver doesn't even realize the blackout occurred.
Okay, let me jump in here with a very modern question.
Sure.
Because I hear 4 seconds of an unpiloted vehicle, and my mind immediately goes to the technology in my driveway right now. I have lane keep assist, adaptive cruise control, automatic emergency braking.
The modern safety suite.
Yeah. Shouldn't this multi-billion-dollar tech be our ultimate safety net exactly when our biology fails us?
It seems logical that technology should save us here.
Yeah.
But under conditions of deep fatigue, it actually creates a lethal false confidence.
How so?
Let's look at how the body actually stays awake. When you are fully driving, manually managing the micro-adjustments of the steering wheel, feathering the accelerator, you are engaged in a constant loop of physical feedback. This is known as proprioception.
Okay, proprioception.
This physical engagement sends continuous signals to your brain that you are performing an active, vital task, which actively helps fight off sleep.
So the physical act of driving is an anchor keeping the brain online.
Yes. Now, what happens when you turn on lane assist and adaptive cruise control at 4 a.m.?
You let go.
You remove the physical anchor. The car takes over the minor steering corrections and the speed adjustments. Your muscles relax. Because that physical feedback loop is broken, your brain determines that active engagement is no longer required.
Oh, wow.
Handing the physical workload to the car actually accelerates the brain's transition into sleep.
So because my hands don't have to grip the wheel as tightly, my brain literally thinks it has permission to shut down.
It does. And it gets even worse when you consider the social ecosystem of the highway.
What do you mean by that?
By relying on that technology while exhausted, the driver quietly passes a massive, invisible risk backward. Imagine a long-haul truck driver maintaining a safe following distance right behind that family car. That truck driver is looking at the car's taillights as a stable reference point. They are assuming the person in front of them is awake, rational, and behaving predictably.
Right, because the car is staying in its lane.
Exactly. They have absolutely no way of knowing the driver ahead has crossed into a biological state where they might drift, brake, or swerve without warning. The trust of the road fails entirely without a single warning sign.
That is deeply unsettling. You're trusting a taillight that is literally being operated by an unconscious brain.
Yeah.
And the road doesn't know how long you've been driving. It only processes the physics of the next second, which transitions perfectly into how we value our time, and a concept the chapter calls the 86,400 seconds.
Right. There are 86,400 seconds in a single day.
hmm
Think about how fiercely we guard our time in our daily lives. We optimize our calendars, we hate waiting in lines, we schedule meetings down to the minute.
Oh yeah, time is money.
We fundamentally understand that time carries massive value.
But when we get behind the wheel, that logic just kind of evaporates.
Completely. On a road, we treat the very seconds that carry our physical lives with casual disregard. A hurried overtake, an impatient blast of the horn, a casual U-turn because the gap in traffic, looks manageable.
Yeah.
These are actions that happen in a split second, a second that can never be undone.
And the text points out that this isn't just about the obvious rule breakers, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
The chapter points out that the vast majority of road harm isn't caused by cartoonish villains driving recklessly. It's caused by ordinary, self-proclaimed careful people committing quiet daily violations just to save a fraction of a minute.
We do these tiny violations, we survive them, and they just become part of our daily routine.
Yeah.
But here is the question that has been bothering me as I read through this research. If the stakes are literal life and death, and the math of these seconds is so brutal, why don't we change?
That is the big question.
Because we all see the news. We all pass horrific accidents on the highway. You see a wrecked car, you feel sick to your stomach, you think, what an absolute tragedy. And then the very next morning, you're back to checking your phone at 60 kilometers an hour. Why doesn't witnessing tragedy fundamentally change our habits?
To enter that, we really have to look at cognitive dissonance and how the brain compartmentalizes information. Grief and habit live in two entirely separate neurological zip codes.
Okay, unpack that for me.
When you see a tragedy or you pass a wrecked car, you process that through your limbic system, specifically the amygdala. You feel genuine emotional sorrow and empathy. But, as we discussed earlier, your driving habits live deep in the basal ganglia.
And those two systems aren't communicating with each other.
They rarely intersect when it comes to self-correction. The emotional brain feels the shock, but the habit-driven brain is never forced to audit its own behavior.
So what happens instead?
Instead, the brain deploys a defense mechanism to protect your ego. It immediately rationalizes the tragedy to create distance. You tell yourself, that accident happened because it was raining, or because they were a bad driver, or because it was a dangerous intersection.
We make excuses for them to protect ourselves.
Right. It doesn't apply to me because I am a careful driver. We isolate the tragedy as a specific event that happened to someone else, leaving our own illusions of safety completely intact.
We build a wall between their tragedy and our habits.
Exactly.
So if intellectual knowledge isn't enough to make us safer, and even feeling emotional grief over an accident isn't enough to change our daily routines, what actually makes a difference? The chapter reaches a conclusion here that I think is incredibly powerful.
It really is.
It says the gap between a driver who causes harm and a driver who protects life isn't about passing a written test. It's about an internal shift in identity.
That is the ultimate resolution of the chapter. It distinguishes between compliance and character.
Compliance versus character.
Yes. Think about a person who only puts on a helmet or a seatbelt because they spot a police officer at the intersection. That person is merely renting their safety from the enforcement system. The moment the camera is gone or the officer is out of sight, the safe behavior completely vanishes.
Because the motivation was external. It was just about avoiding a ticket.
Right. True safety requires an internal identity shift. It's moving from compliance, obeying the rules when you are being watched, to character, doing the right thing because you fundamentally value the fragile human lives you are moving among.
Wow.
It is an active decision to say, I am a person who protects life on the road.
And when you adopt that identity, it travels with you. It operates at 2 in the morning on a completely empty rural highway with the exact same consistency as it does at noon in a crowded city center.
Exactly. The identity is the anchor, not the enforcement.
All right, let's pull all of these threads together for everyone listening. We started by dismantling the myth of the expert driver, learning that 20 years of survival is often just a long streak of getting away with unexamined habits.
Right? Our brains are constantly downregulating our perception of risk every time we survive a bad choice.
Then we dug into the neuroscience of the 2-second lie, seeing how our basal ganglia executes couch-built phone habits at 60 kilometers an hour, literally rendering us blind for 33 meters.
And we also explored predictive coding and how driving our familiar mental maps can turn us into unpredictable hazards for strangers sharing the road.
We confronted the danger of open space, proving that safety is a constant choice, not just a mechanical ability. And we looked at the biology of the 4 a.m. microsleep.
Which revealed the terrifying reality that outsourcing our physical engagement to modern car technology actually accelerates our brain's descent into unconsciousness.
Finally, we unpacked the cognitive dissonance of why witnessing tragedy fails to change us. Our emotional sorrow simply doesn't talk to our deeply ingrained habits.
Forcing us to realize that the only lasting solution is a fundamental shift in our internal identity, from compliance to character.
To all the learners out there, here is the unyielding truth from Chapter 4. The road receives every single physical choice exactly as it is made. It does not adjust for your good intention.
It really doesn't.
It doesn't care that you've driven safely for 2 decades. It responds only to the physics of your speed, your position, and your active attention in this specific second. The asphalt holds the imprint of your vehicle for a fraction of a moment and lets it go, but the choices you make in that moment echo permanently into the lives of everyone around you.
That's a heavy thought.
It is. We spend so much time worrying about external factors, bad weather, poor road conditions, the erratic behavior of other drivers. But I want to leave you with a provocative thought to mull over the next time you put your keys in the ignition and pull out of your driveway.
Let's hear it.
What if the most dangerous thing you carry in your vehicle isn't your phone or your speed, but your unbroken streak of getting away with it? The next time you get behind the wheel, take a breath, look at the cars around you, and ask yourself a very hard question. Are you actually driving the shared reality of the road in front of you, or are you just driving the private memory of it?